when you were mentioning uh, like the dog-like creature or the wolf man in the medieval Europe, I was reminded of this tale, which I would love to read more about, of this supposedly Christian saint called Saint Christopher, who is depicted as having had like a wolf. So I can't say more about this because even when I heard about this story before, and I don't know if I ordered the comic book because Eastern Orthodox Church released one of the comic books on this topic of Saint Christopher, like serving in God's army, but for some reason he was portrayed as a wolfman. So that went through my mind. But also when you talked about werewolves and Tanakh or the Bible, I was just reminded of the King Nebuchadnezzar, which is very hard for me to pronounce because in my language we say it differently. Even though he was not a werewolf, he was the closest thing in the Bible you can see as werewolf. I mean, he wasn't killing and drinking people, or eating people and drinking their blood. But that was, for me at least, the closest to the werewolf in the Bible, because he was turned to something that resembles to that state, at least partially, not fully, of course, but partially. So I just wanted to mention King Nebuchadnezzar and Saint Christopher, when it comes to this topic, because I think both are very interesting characters.
Yeah, Saint Christ. I don't know an awful lot about Saint Christopher. Like, he is depicted with a dog's head very early on. There are a few other Christian saints that have very distinct connections to animals. Or sorry, very distinct connection to wolves in specific. There's all sorts of Christian saints who connect to animals. Saint Blaise of France and Saint Francis of Assisi are going to be the two most well known here. In both cases, the issue is less connected to. Well, I won't say it's not connected to the supernatural wolf, because it is. But first and foremost, it's sort of connected to the question of what are wolves? Because in the Greek mind, so this is going back way back here. In the Greek mind, the wolf was a fascinating creature because on the one hand, it perfectly embodied wildness and bestiality in the sense of savaging things, not in the sense of in the other sense. But on the other hand, the wolf was and is exceptionally social, very friendly, bonds well with humans. Heck, anyone who owns a dog has seen this firsthand. Like the wolf, so it's this amazingly versatile animal that sort of embodies the two most extremes of nature in one figure. And the one who talks the most extensively about this was a figure of the second sophistic alien, who talks very, very extensively about wolves and held a very high opinion of them. And he had a huge influence on Christian theology, or Christian bestiaries, sorry, I should say. His depictions of animals in his natural history or history of animals? Oh, that's embarrassing. Okay, it's a 3-volume series on animals. You can buy it in English from Loeb. Lovely work. Lots of really strange stuff in there. Fun to quote. He takes Aristotle's dictum that mice can eat through iron on the Cyclades seriously. I always like to send that one to people when debating Aristotelianism. But his views on wolves in particular had a profound influence on Christianity. And when I mentioned discussions about, like, are there good werewolves, it had mostly to do with, like, man is, on the one hand, man is made in the image of God, right? Man is exceptionally holy. As Jesus himself says, John 10:34, I say to ye are gods, right? Man is a god in the body of an animal, but he's in the body of an animal, and he's in a fallen state. And so where the werewolf tends to enter when we look at theological speculation, both from Jews and Christians, I'm sure there's a Muslim writing about werewolves somewhere. I haven't come across them yet. But from the Jewish and Christian perspective, is the werewolf almost perfectly embodies this paradoxical duality of man. like we're getting into weird. It's like, yeah, it's like you're like, oh, we're going to talk about cryptids like Bigfoot, and now I'm like, yeah, the holy wolf man. So, but no, it's like to various Christian theologians, and to Jewish theologians, the werewolf or the wolf, sans any man involved, sort of embodies this strange duality between the best part of ourselves and the worst. Uh, this shows up. I'm not going to say it shows up in St. Christopher. It probably does, but it definitely shows up with the famous story of St. Francis of Assisi taming the wolf, where it's savaging the crops and it's just doing all this havoc. And he shows up and he's like, hey. And we don't know what he does, but he gets the wolf. He comes back to the town with the wolf and he's like, don't worry. It's harmless now. And the wolf protects the townspeople for like 10 years before it dies a natural death of old age. And the townspeople deeply mourn and bury the wolf. The importance of this story from the perspective of our studies of medieval Christianity and wolves is not so much did this happen at a historical level, but what this says about St. Francis's spiritual mission, and also how we view animality, right? Because he could have just killed the wolf, right? Like if St. Francis had killed the wolf, nobody would sit here going, oh, what a douche, right? We would just look at it, be like, oh, yeah, the wolf was savaging the crop, so he took it out. But he didn't kill the wolf, he saved the wolf, literally. He turned him into a servant of God. The story of St. Blaise is less explicitly connected to wolves, but it's very similar. He lived a wild life, like a bestial life prior to meeting Saint Hilarion, the hilarious saint. And after being converted to the cause of Jesus, the funny thing is he lived a super bestial life beforehand, but after coming to Jesus, he still lives a super bestial life, but as a hairy man living in caves in the wild. So the connection, like there's not a great connection between St. Blaise and werewolves. I read a really not fun book that made that case. It's like, oh, Blaise means wolf. Yes, but it's more that like the bestial aspects of the wolf are sort of refracted through the hagiography of St. Blaise. And saying, St. Blaise was a historical person. He founded the convent system in France. He might be the patron saint of the country. Somebody is welcome to correct me on that if there's a different saint. But yeah, as I said, it's a dispute on the nature of animality that tends to refract into werewolves, rather than like I wouldn't say St. Christopher's a werewolf.